All right, so I'm going to be talking about 6L80 tuning and 6L90, of course. There's a lot of people that always ask me, how do you tune them? What tricks do you use? Things of that nature. There's not a lot of info out there, and if there is, it's misinformation. What I consider misinformation. There are some guides, like the Tuning School and some other website. I believe 6L80tuning.com. But from what I've heard, they're not that great. I mean, they're great for for your generic cookie cutter setups, maybe like 600 horsepower and below. But these these methods that I'm going to show you, I've used them in 900 horsepower vehicles. I mean, there's some that I haven't put on the dyno, so I can't say yet, but I got some of these trains, shifting good and lasting for a good while, So we're gonna be using a GA file. This GA file, I believe, was on a vehicle that I tuned that made, I believe, 700 horsepower or something like that. We're gonna also be using the Bluecat Trans tool. It's a calculator developed by Bluecat, as you can see here. It's a it's a good tool to use. You can find it in the HP Tuners forum. All you can do is just Google BC_trans calculator, and the first result should be the one where you can download the calculator. Anyways, so starting off with the 6L80 portion of the file. What I like to do first is, of course, use a calculator for setting up the shift speeds and whatnot. So we're gonna treat this like the vehicle that it is, 700 horsepower, 750 around there, with another say blower, instant torque. So we're gonna go to the gear and tire wizard, and we're gonna see current gear ratio, tire size. We're gonna input it on the calculator. We're gonna make sure we select the 6L80. We're gonna select the gear ratio is at 292, the tire size 2622. I believe the idle was at 800, and then you input your torque converter values. I believe it was a 3200. Minimum RPM you want the vehicle to idle at in every gear, right? So you can hover over the actual words, and they'll tell they'll give you a hint of what each one stands for. But minimum engine speed allowed, what converter is like. So I mean, we don't want it to look too bad, so you can set it up to 1350, 1400. Depends on the camshaft, things like that. We're gonna make this shift at, well, I mean, an LSA car with pulley and heads and all that stuff, water blower, 6500 is fine. And then you can adjust. I mean, you can discover this by yourself, right? There's aggressiveness from upshift, downshift, things like that. I tend to just go 10 on downshift, downshift. And you can offset the tables up or down. But anyways, you choose your respective vehicle, the OAGA. And then this is the most important, in my opinion, part of the calculator. This is lead time. So what lead time is, pretty much summed up, is the amount of time you have to give the transmission for the clutches to fill up, for for the pressure to accumulate, things of that nature. For a tire transmission or for something that ramps up very, very fast in terms of mile per hour, you're going to want to put this number up very, very high. As you can see in the description given by Bluecat, this is a lead applied to the shift speed and RPMs. 10 being the most insane amount of lead. You use that for lazy or tire transmissions. You give it time to shift. Or cars with high amounts of power, a value of 2 is typical of normal 6L80 stuff. So your generic 350, 450 horsepower around there, and then 3 to 4 is 550, things like that. So we're gonna be in the 700s. So I like to use approximately 6 or 6.5. Excuse me. So after everything's said and done, and you personalize the settings to what you want and things of that sort, we export it, and then we choose the 6 speed. But before we start doing all of this, we gotta make sure the VSS count, the tire rest per mile, and the gear ratio all match up on the file. So we go to the speedo tab, go to calibration, and then just compare it, make sure everything's the same. That's pretty much dead on. So we do not even put anything there. So we're gonna start with the part throttle shift, and then all you do is just copy the table, paste it, that's it. Do this for 5th, 6th, and then you got the wide open throttle shift tables. Oh, so you see there is a 2-column wide open throttle, so you just select this and gives you a 2-column portion. Just paste it. Do the same for the rest, and you're on your way. But anyways, once that is done, this is for the wide open throttle. So you see, we commanded a 6500 RPM shift, but based on the lead time of 6. The table, or the wide open throttle shift RPM for first to second, because it ramps up so damn fast, we initiate the shift at 4750, as well as the mile per hour. We initiate it at a very low mile per hour. So that is one of the key tricks to keeping these transmissions alive and making them shift. It's the lead, making sure that you initiate the shift very, very early. If you have high horsepower, you have something that ramps up very quick. This does not apply with stock or close to stock vehicles, sub 400 horsepower. As you can see when you choose the appropriate lead time. We'll go back and we'll demonstrate as we drop the lead time to something that's kind of stock. We would assume this is a 400 horsepower GA, 175 or 2, and then you export it. You see, it's at 6500, and if we increase the lead time to 6, because we have a high horsepower vehicle, it initiates the shift much, much earlier. So that's one of the key components of making these transmissions shift and last. Then you do the following, TCC tables, just copy paste, things like that, and it's just pure copy and paste. You can decide, if you want to lock it up at 5th, 4th, or 3rd. Depends on your converter. If you have a triple disc converter, or you want to load your positive displacement blower, you might lock it up a little sooner, things like that. But that pretty much summarizes the VC Trans calculator portion. You just copy and paste it, to the respective tables, and then you can do the same for pattern A. And usually pattern A is the TUTD section of the tune. Just make sure everything's the same. I didn't do 5th, or I didn't do 6th because it's self-explanatory. You just copy over what the calculator spits out. Anyways, we're moving on to the auto shift properties, and in the auto shift properties, we start with the shift time. I like to zero everything out on the desired shift times on both the special and the downshift and everything, and then control the shift times with with the shift time torque adders. And you generally, anything below wide open throttle value, so sub 354, I generally do not touch. It's up to personal preference, but what I do touch is this bottom portion. This is, since we zero out any adders and things like that, this is generally what we're going to see when we have the transmission shift, from first to second. Well, we use a quarter of a second shift time for first to second, second to third, 0.25, 0.21 at this RPM. Depends on where you're shifting the transmission at. But generally, this corner is where you're going to input your values, right? So if you want a faster shift, you might put 1, 0.1, and it's going to try to complete the shift in that amount of time. Of course, a factory trans will have a very hard time doing that. shifting within that, that the requested time that you selected if it's 0.1. So I generally keep it around 0.2, things of that nature. You do the same for the upshift special. Just make sure to do it for first, second, third, fourth. Fifth and sixth and fourth, fifth, you might not need it. Depends if you're doing mile racing or things like that, highway racing. But in the quarter, I mean, very hard to get to the point, unless you're driving 150s, 160s, something like that. Downshift, I generally don't touch. I just leave whatever factory settings is in there. It's zero, zero, requested 0 millisecond shift time for the downshift. It's not going to happen, so it's just going to do its best, Other stuff I generally don't touch, like I mentioned. After that, we go to what I consider the more important part of the transmission properties, which is the shift pressure. And you can define, the pressure of the pattern mode. You can change this to special or normal. I never really mess with that. But there are people, that they want, their TTD to shift like normal, like on drive or things like that. I do not mess with that. What we do have to mess with is the clamp pressure. This is the maximum allowed pressure for any shift table value. So depending on the power, let's say around the 700 horsepower range, since we are messing with this G8, I would, clamp it around 1500, and then up these to 2000 and 2000, and then make sure to address the max line pressure as well, based on the gear. So just go ahead and, 1500. This can go up or this can go down, depending on your power level. For the 900 horsepower range, I tend to use a very much higher number than this. What number? I mean, it depends. I can't, just spit out a random number. It depends on the transmission. Depends who built it. Depends if it's still factory. So a common value is 3000. I put 3000 kPa. But there are people that I know that have used maxed it out, the maximum clamp to 4096 kPa. This is entirely what I consider a topic of experimentation and, of course, of vlogging. You don't want to damage any transmission components with such a high pressure. Anyways, back to 1500. What we'll do now is we're just going to focus purely on drive. We're not going to focus on any other pattern modes or anything like that. You can start modifying that to your liking, but I'm just trying to keep it concise. So this is one of the major points of the properties where people generally don't mess with. Of course, you got to see what you're messing with. You got to see transmissional temp and torque that you're commanding, or that's the engine generating, or that it thinks it's generating. It depends on if you have your injector scales or whatnot. But anyways, tend to increase this area up about I would say about 30%, 40%, depends on the power level like I mentioned. So as you can see, after 443 pound-feet of torque that the computer thinks it's generating, it would command 1670 kPa of clamp pressure. The thing is, we have a clamp of 1500, so it wouldn't matter. This is the clamp. Doesn't matter if it's a 17 or 18 or whatever you put. There will be a cap where the line pressure will not surpass. Anyways, do the same. To if you want a little bit firmer shifts, apart throttle, and things of that nature. Generally increase all of these tables. First and second and third. Maybe 30%. Depends on your power level. I mean, if you have more generating more power, you're gonna go higher on the pressure. One thing that we do need to address is if you have more clutches on on whatever gear it is, because it's built, then you might need to back off on the pressure. It depends. You have to speak to your builder. So sometimes you have to go down. It depends. And I leave this up to your builder what he recommends. But generally, I go up on pressure. This helps to shift and initiate the shift much quicker than if it were to be stock or factory. So do this for for first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 1, 3, 1, 4, etc., etc., etc. Then you can modify the upshifts for different pressure. For different pattern modes. But like I said, you do the same. And you tailor it to your liking. Now, the most important part in what I consider trans tuning for the 680s is the depth pressure and the oncoming pressure presets. So the oncoming pressure presets would be the ones responsible for flaring or for having a very late shift at wide open throttle. So whenever you're thinking to yourself, man, why is it flaring? Why is it hitting the limiter? I commanded the shift to initiate at 4750, but it's still it's commanding it, but it's taking so damn long to shift. Well, the answer to that is the oncoming pressure presets. What this is, it's pretty much a pressure applied to to the clutch to commence the shift. So if you have, there's some people that have told me, man, I'm driving my vehicle, and sometimes at part throttle it feels like it's flaring, and I'm not it's not making much power. It just feels like it's flaring. It feels very, very weak. It feels like it's slipping. That has nothing to do with the oncoming pressure presets. That has everything to do with the offgoing pressure presets. So when you have a low pressure presets for the offgoing, it tends to apply the oncoming while the offgoing is still set, and it has that weird flaring or has that weird slipping effect on the transmission. But I know you guys are not interested on the part throttle, so I'm just going to keep it very short and mention that I increase these values maybe threefold. But the general settings I like to do is 500, 900, and then 1700. This is for every single table from first, second, third, fourth, fifth. I don't do it. Maybe you shouldn't do it in fourth, fifth, sixth. It's up to to your builder, things like that. But I do it all of them. I do it to all of them, all the tables. You might have issues on fifth, sixth though, because of overdrive and all that stuff. But you also do it for the TTD for the first, second, third, fourth. So just this is just a starting point. You can go up or down, and this will make the transmission shift almost instantaneously. It feels like a 480, built 480 or built 400. It makes it shift almost instantaneously, and this is what I consider one of the most unknown tables when it comes to 6LED tuning. Many people do not even address it. Many people don't even think there's anything there. So make sure to address this. It's very, 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 very important. So whenever you do, one of the things I need to mention is because we have adaptive pressure. Whenever we modify these pressure tables, the transmission will generally start reducing the amount of fluid going to the clutch pack, or not fluid, but fluid pressure, right? Because it's seen that the shift is being initiated too soon. So what it would do is it would adapt and start pulling pressure, and this pressure would go down and down and down and down and down until once again it starts shifting very, very lazy, and it starts somewhat flaring or feeling, like a lazy, tired transmission. So what I do in that case is I just disable the upshift of that. Now some people might not agree with that, but I've never had an issue, and I don't want to reset and then preset the learning, every 2 weeks, because the transmission learned that, hey, there's too much pressure on the oncoming preset, so let's back it off. Same goes for off-going, if it feels that part throttle, it's hanging, it's gonna add some pressure, So the other one is removing pressure, and this one's adding pressure. Those are just some of the scenarios. This does not, convolute the whole thing. It doesn't summarize the whole, spectrum of possibilities when it comes to shifting and things like that. This is very simple, but I'm just showing you what you need to address. With some people modify these. Some people set it to 400s. This is just the amount of volume, that each clutch pack has or gets during the shifts. I generally do not mess with this as specified by the builder. But yeah, this summarizes the properties, which I consider one of the most important portions of 680 tuning, especially this specific area here. It's very, very important, and make sure you address the clamp or the cap for the line pressure. Auto TCC, you might want to, you have an aftermarket converter, you might want to address the offset. Sometimes I just set it to 90. Depends, the make, the amount of slip, the size of the converter. But generally, I just mess with the regular offset. I don't mess with anything else. You make sure to zero all of these out if you have a converter, aftermarket. And I mean, if you're still DOD or things of that nature, just do the same for the DOD portion. Some people like to lock it up in third. Some people like to lock it up in fourth. You can only do this. Well, I mean, you can do it with single disc, but you're going to damage both your converter and you might damage your transmission. And I generally don't lock it. Maybe only after going to fifth. But if you're locking it, that means that your converter builder or your manufacturer didn't do a good job. So you shouldn't need to lock it. That's dangerous to your transmission. And if you're turbocharged or you have a blower and you have a lot of timing, locking the converter, it might increase the cylinder pressure. You might lift heads or you might snap your rods, things like that. So if you have a good converter supplier, you shouldn't need to lock it up. You'll have minimum slip. So I just don't lock it up at all. All right, so manual, generally don't mess with this. Torque management, so this is another key area where we do some modifications. So when it's factory, all of this is enabled. Just torque reduction. So torque reduction is very, very, very important to keeping these transmissions alive. So this is how it is factory, and a 1 means that you're going to multiply the shift torque by this factor. And you multiply by 1, so you're keeping all the torque management in a sense. So what you can do is, if you want to shift a little quicker or shift, it depends. Everything depends on the transmission, the age of the transmission, the mileage, the abuse, and things like that. But in this case, we're going to go ahead and first or second, since it ramps up so quick, we might need to pull timing for it to complete the shift in time. So we might go in with 0.4. So that means that we're going to multiply the value by 0.4, reducing it by 60%. Okay. So for the second, third, fourth, fifth, and fifth to sixth, I generally like to use like a 0.3 or 0.2. Like I said, this is purely experimental. You have to try it out on the street. If it's not completing the shifts, you might need to go with a higher value because it winds up so quick. There's some people that I've seen that just zero out all of this, and I mean, if they're having success with it, then go ahead. But I believe that removing all of the torque management will kill a transmission, especially a 680, very, very, very quick. I tend to leave this in ones. But I do address the first, second, third, fourth, all the way to 5 to 6. Now, there's some people, like I mentioned, that disable the upshift torque reduction, and I think that's a big no. I enable it. I leave it to the timing being pulled to complete the shift, as well as lead time, as we had mentioned in the auto shift speed portion of the trans tune. One thing that I do change is the speed control terminate. I set it to immediate. It pretty much just determines the method used to end speed control for the torque management at the end of the shift. So you want it immediately. You don't want torque based or things like that, because you might have inaccurate injector data, you might have it scaled or things like that, and it might throw off the way it shifts. For the stall torque management, I just max these values out. We don't want none of that. Tip torque management, flex torque management, I just leave that factory. I do not mess with it. You don't need to mess with it. And that pretty much concludes the transmission portion. There is some things you might want to address in the engine side. There's some people that don't like the way the transmission bogs at every shift. Whenever you have a canned vehicle, it speeds up and then there's like a bog and then it throws a shift. That's because the timing is being pulled. So I generally use this setup. Like I said, everything's very experimental. You need to tailor it to your vehicle, to your cam, to your gearing, to your transmission, to your converter, things of that nature. But during part throttle, the timing is going to be pulled to a minimum of 15 degrees. So you won't feel the bog as bad, because if you look at a factory minimum final spark table, these are in negatives, or very, very, very low single digit numbers. So you're going to go from something at part throttle, maybe 30 degrees of cruising timing, and then after it shifts, it bogs it down all the way to -1 or -2 or maybe -10, and it feels very, very sluggish whenever it shifts, and it feels almost like it backfires. Some people don't like that, so I use this configuration. Now this portion depends on where you shift, right? But generally we shift at 64, 65. This is the amount of timing that's going to be pulled to complete the shift. So if you pull timing, you pull power. If you have no power, I mean, the transmission can shift accordingly, right? Because it doesn't have a lot of strain, to overcome. But you might want to play with this if you feel like it's bogging too low or things like that. You might want to increase it. There's some people actually go to positives. I never go to positives. I generally, keep this alone, or something in the -10s or things like that, because I like the way that the torque management pulls some timing, to complete the shift and make sure that during the shift there's not a lot of power that could damage the clutch packs or things like that. There's another table that people address is the torque management. Some people zero this out. Some people put 20s, or some people, something like that. I leave it factory, or sometimes I just zero it out. It depends on the power. If it has a lot of power, I generally keep it in the negatives. I keep it factory. But if it's 500, 400 horsepower, I might just zero it out. This is the minimum allowed spark adjustment in response to torque management. So that pretty much sums it up. I've never had any big issues or anything like that with trans tuning with these settings. If anything, it'll all go down to the DC calculator in terms of shifting. The way some people are very picky. Oh, shift a little too early in the part throttle, shift a little too late. So, but when it comes to putting the power down and making shift and all things like that, never had any issue. Had several. I actually have Silverado pickup truck in the 900,000 horsepower range, and it has not messed up the transmission, the 6L80. So these things, are something to keep in mind. It's a good starter course, in my opinion, or a good crash course for people trying to keep their 6L80s alive, or some people, they're dealing with a tuner that either, doesn't have the knowledge or doesn't, want to drive it in the street and test it out, because sometimes you can't do this on the dyno. So this is a good starting point, and I believe it's what you need to make these transmissions last and shift properly. But thanks for watching this video, and if you have any questions, post some comments or questions, and I'll see if I can get to you. Maybe you can send me your file, and I'll take a look, and we'll go from there.